Hey there, I'm back with 10 Mile Day. We're starting on page 154 today for part 2. So hopefully you're liking this informational story and you are soaking it up like a sponge. Let's see what happens today. Alongside the grade, the telegraph construction party worked frantically to keep pace with the track layers. They set the poles, hammered on the crossbars, and hauled out, hung, and insulated the wire. The track boss stalked up and down the line, barking out commands and encouragement. The steady hammering of spikes, the rhythmic thud of iron rails, and even the men's labored breathing beat like a drum across the barren plain. A reporter pulled out his pocket watch and counted the rails as they were laid down. To everyone's amazement, 240 feet of iron were placed in 1 minute and 20 seconds. By 9 a.m., almost 2 miles of track had been spiked and tamped. Even the Union Pacific men, who had laughed at the Central Pacific crews, had to admit it was quality work. Water, food, and tool wagons creaked up and down the line as the heat rose with the morning sun. Chinese workers wove in and out of the men, delivering water and tea to quench their thirst. At the front, Crocker and Stowbridge oversaw every detail. Now and then, when something amusing happened, Crocker's merry laugh echoed from his carriage. With the completion of another 2 miles of track, the second supply train pulled back to the siding, and the third train steamed forward, belching thick clouds of black smoke. Next in line, ready to serve the midday meal, was the so-called pioneer train, the boarding house for some of the workers and the office and living quarters of James and Hannah Strobridge. Next page is just a picture. At 1:30, the whistle sounded, calling a halt for lunch. Whirlwind number 62, the pioneer train locomotive, pushed the kitchen cars up, and the boarding boss served hot boiled beef. A quick measurement showed that 6 miles of track had already been laid, spiked, and bolted that morning. Whoops and hollers went up as the news spread among the men. They were now confident they could reach their goal of 10 miles in one day, and they named their rest stop Camp Victory. At 2:30, work began again, but a special crew had to be called in. The tracks were now climbing the west slope of the Promontory Mountains. The climb was steep and full of curves, and the rails had to be bent. Lacking measuring instruments, this new crew judged the curves by sight. They jammed the rails between blocks and then slowly and carefully hammered them into the right shapes. Every rail now took extra time to mold and fit. As the afternoon wore on, the foreman continued to ride the line, encouraging the men. Although the horses pulling the iron cars were changed every 2 hours, they could no longer run up the grade. Now they had to walk slowly up the steep hillside. The rail gang was dripping with sweat, and their muscles must have burned from overuse, but not one man stopped to rest. With each hour, another mile of track reached toward Promontory Summit. By 7 p.m., the sun was dipping behind Monument Point. Strobridge signaled for the final blast from the train whistle. The exhausted men cast down their tools, and the day's work came to an abrupt end. How much rail had the men of Central Pacific laid? 2 Union Pacific engineers took out their surveying chains and began to measure. Everyone waited for the final count. Then it came. The railhead was 10 miles, 56 feet farther east than it had been the previous evening. The crews flung their hats into the air, cheering and shaking hands all around. They had done the impossible again. The Union Pacific's record was destroyed, and Thomas Durant lost the bet. A total of 3,520 rails, twice that number of fish plates, 28,160 spikes, and 14,080 nuts and bolts had been placed to complete the job. The 8 track layers were declared heroes and were featured in later histories. Each had lifted over 125 tons of iron. No single crew has ever beaten their record. The Chinese workers had once again proven themselves to their biased rivals. Each team had something to celebrate. All right, so that's it. Make sure you've answered your CAMI questions with complete sentences, please. That means they start with a capital and end with punctuation, and use part of the question to make the answer. So I can't wait to read those, and I will see you soon. Bye.